What if Yugoslavia had never collapsed? Yes, I know, it sounds like a dream for those who remember summer vacations on the Adriatic coast or evenings listening to Serbian music. But imagine, instead of war, sanctions, and six separate states, we would still have one big country where Tito would still be sitting on the balcony of Belgrade, drinking coffee and smiling at us all. It's a paradox, isn't it? Yugoslavia, which in reality collapsed in the 1990s due to ethnic conflicts and economic problems, suddenly remains as strong as a partisan spirit in the mountains. The irony is that perhaps instead of arguing about borders, we would be arguing whether Rakija is better from Croatia or Serbia, and European politicians in Brussels would still be trying to figure out how to negotiate with Tito, who always had his own way of looking at things. Imagine, instead of the Balkans, where every corner has its own history of discord, we would have a single state that would stand proudly in the middle of Europe, like a gorilla that does not give up even when everyone around it gives up. This topic is a real treasure for those who like to imagine how one change could turn everything upside down. What would have happened to the Balkans if Yugoslavia had survived? How would people, culture, and technology have changed? I will tell you this story as if we were sitting over a cup of coffee, laughing at the curiosities of the past and wondering how close we could have been to a different present. Get ready. There is a story ahead that is hard to put down. Let's dive into a world where Yugoslavia is still alive. So let's imagine that Yugoslavia did not collapse. In real history, the breakup began in 1991 due to an economic crisis, ethnic tensions, and the death of Josip Broz Tito in 1980, which left a power vacuum. But what if things had gone differently? Let's go back to the 1980s and see how an alternative history might have unfolded. The 1980s. Tito remains a symbol of unity. Let's imagine that Tito, this charismatic leader who held Yugoslavia together for 35 years, suddenly decides to hand over power not to chaos, but to a stable system. In 1980, instead of dying, he announced reforms. Decentralization of power among the republics, but with a strong central government to keep the balance. The irony is that perhaps he would have joked with the Serbian and Croatian leaders, saying, "Let's argue about cancer, not borders." His plan works. The economy, though weak, receives support from the West, which sees Yugoslavia as a buffer against the USSR. By the end of the 1980s, Yugoslavia was becoming a regional leader. Thanks to tourism on the Adriatic, industry in Serbia and Croatia, and agriculture in Bosnia and Macedonia, the country survives. In 1989, when the Berlin Wall falls, Yugoslavia is not afraid of chaos, but rather offers refuge to refugees from Eastern Europe. Imagine, instead of war, we see Yugoslav beaches crowded with Germans fleeing from change. The 1990s. Yugoslavia as a European player? When the USSR collapsed in the 1990s, Yugoslavia had a chance. Instead of a civil war, the republics agree on a new constitution where each retains its own culture but works for the common good. Slobodan Milosevic, who in reality fomented nationalism, becomes an economic reformer in this story, joking that it is better to build factories than bunkers. The economy grows thanks to integration with the European community, which sees Yugoslavia as a stable partner. Technology is also developing. In 1995, Belgrade launched the region's first computer network, and Zagreb became the center of the automotive industry. Culture flourishes. Yugoslav cinema, which once rivaled Hollywood, returns with new films where the heroes are not partisans, but engineers and scientists. The irony is that instead of the war, we would have watched series about the adventures of Yugoslav innovators, rather than Balkan dramas. 2000s. Yugoslavia in the global world. In the 2000s, Yugoslavia became part of the EU and NATO, but retained its uniqueness. Sarajevo becomes a cultural capital where Eastern and Western traditions mix, and Ljubljana becomes a center for green technologies. The economy is growing thanks to tourism, IT, and the steel industry. In 2005, Yugoslavia launches a satellite, joking that our partisans are now in space. But not everything is smooth sailing. Ethnic tensions flare up occasionally, but a strong government quells them. In 2008, when the crisis hits Europe, Yugoslavia emerges with fewer losses because its economy is diversified. The irony is that the countries that actually left Yugoslavia now look at it with envy, thinking, if only we had stayed. 2010s, Yugoslavia as a regional leader. In the 2010s, Yugoslavia became the leader of the Balkans. Belgrade and Zagreb compete for the title of technological capital, and Split becomes a tourist magnet. In 2015, the country hosts the Olympic Games in Sarajevo, showing the world its unity. Culture is booming. Yugoslav music, from turbo folk to classical, is becoming popular in Europe. Imagine, in 2018, a Yugoslav duo wins the Eurovision Song Contest, and Europe dances to their rhythms. Technology is advancing. In 2017, Yugoslavia launches the region's first electric railroad. But there are also challenges. Young people in Kosovo and Bosnia sometimes protest, demanding more autonomy. But the government finds a compromise. The irony is that instead of war, we would be discussing whose Rakija is better on Yugoslav television. The present, Yugoslavia in 2025. Let's fast forward to 2025. Yugoslavia is a stable state of 20 million people that controls the Balkans. Belgrade is a financial center and Dubrovnik is a tourist paradise. Technology is booming. Yugoslav companies are developing electric cars, and Sarajevo is a center for artificial intelligence. Cultures are mixed. In Ljubljana, you can hear Serbian pop and Croatian opera in the same evening. But there are also tensions. In 2023, protests erupted in Kosovo, but the government quickly settled them. The economy is strong, but dependent on tourism and exports. It is ironic that Europe, which once shunned Yugoslavia, now asks for its help in crises. This united Yugoslavia also had an impact on sports. In 2025, the Yugoslav soccer team wins the European Championship, bringing together the best players from Serbia, Croatia, and Bosnia. The stadiums in Zagreb and Belgrade are packed, and the fans chant Yugoslavija, like in the good old days. The irony is that instead of rivalry between countries, we would have seen rivalry between cities, who would throw the best party after the victory. And Yugoslavia would have become an example for other multinational states. In 2025, its model of unity and diversity will be studied in Turkey, India, and even Canada. Imagine, a delegation from Quebec comes to Sarajevo to learn how Yugoslavia managed to keep the peace, and the Yugoslavs just laugh, saying, "It's simple. More Rakija and less politics." So we have reached the end of our journey through the world where Yugoslavia did not collapse. What do we have? A single Balkan state that withstood the chaos, became a regional leader, and gave the world its culture. Imagine, in 2025, we would be drinking coffee on the beaches of Croatia, listening to Yugoslav music in Belgrade, and laughing that Tito is still somewhere in his mountains, looking down on us with a smile. It is ironic that we often complain about EU bureaucracy, but in this world we could complain about Yugoslav lines for Rakija or discussions about whose cuisine is better. This story makes us think about how fragile our world is. One wrong step and Yugoslavia could have become an example, not a lesson. Perhaps we are lucky that it collapsed, because otherwise we would all be dancing to turbo folk and arguing about the nature of Rakija every day. But it's a question worthy of coffee and reflection. If you enjoyed pondering such what-ifs, please like this post. It's our little signal of unity. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories where we turn history upside down. Let's figure out together how she could come back, friends. See you soon.